Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Friday, April 19th, 2019. Good Friday to all of you out there. And thank you for being patient during this time of relocation for the Grand Solar Minimum channel. We are proud to say that we are going to be returning to normal broadcast starting tonight, and then back to Monday through Friday doing the solar updates and a few live hangout shows. That will be somewhat met slowly but surely, but we are working towards that. But definitely live broadcasts will resume on a bi-daily basis, I should say. We were talking Wednesdays and Friday nights, and a possibility of a weekend show as well on Saturday. And which leads me to a special announcement that I'll have for you guys in the near future. But we have a guest that will be on the Grand Solar Minimum channel who is going to help us break it down for us. Give us the timeline. We always talk about the Grand Solar Minimum and the science that's involved in it. But the most important thing to this whole puzzle is having a full understanding of what's happening step by step. And I think all channels that discuss GSM do a pretty good job at throwing the pieces out there. But I think all of us can agree it's a lot to take in, and I don't think we've successfully communicated that message from A to B, or A to Z, I should say, with complete description and detail. But I will announce the guest in a near show, probably here in the near future by Monday night. We will do a broadcast on Monday night, 9 p.m. And by then, we will reveal who our guest is. A very special guest, and excited to have him. He's very knowledgeable, very aware of what's happening. And, as we've discussed as many times before, the signs are all around us, and that is the truth. And as some people say, that's facts right there. All right, let's go ahead and get started for tonight's broadcast. Taking a look first, because this storm is kind of a big deal right now, as Ron Burgundy would say. Look at this low pressure system out here in Kentucky, western Kentucky, I should say, and northern Tennessee as well. Looks like we got a little bit of something we would see in the Gulf. Yep, that looks like an eye, folks. So very strange. We've already seen a storm in the Plain States earlier this year, where they called it a Lando cane, and now we are seeing this powerful low pressure system right now that's spinning off into the northeast. But this main system right here, as we get the most of the moisture going up right now through the northeast, this system right here is just going to stay kind of dormant and spin off. So very interesting to watch this situation right now, and we will continue to monitor it, but we'll get more into that later in the show. Let's go ahead and start off with our solar wind conditions. Now let's go ahead and update that. It's been a while. All right, so they haven't gone up much. Solar wind speed sitting at 333.5 kilometers per second with a density of 10. Looking at the sun, we do have two sunspots. I announced this last night. We've had these sunspots around now for some time. 2738 and 2739 are both small sunspots that do not pose any risk whatsoever of solar flares. Sunspot number 23, and we still are sitting at 62 days without sunspots for 2019. Right now we are at 58% of the year without sunspots. And let's hop over here to the grandsolarminimum.com at our space weather section here. And let's take a look at solar X-ray flux. As you can see, some increase somewhat, a steep increase, I should say, as well. But nothing amazing, nothing reaching maybe a minor B class crackling flare possibly. So nothing too concerning. Now the KP indices have been very low. We've had a 24-hour max of 2. And really, we're either talking about a 1 kp or a 0 to maybe even a 2, but that's it. So very quiet activity on the sun. We'll take a look at these sunspots as they are turning away from Earth, as here we see them on the very western limb of our sun. Let's see that all the way. Oh, I gotta reset it. Sorry, folks. Here we go. Live. We love it. Okay, it doesn't want to play. No problem. But there's our sunspots. Very little, very tiny, not strong at all. And let's take a look at our SDO in motion, as right now we have a couple of coronal holes, which I believe I spoke about these coronal holes in our last broadcast last Friday, that we saw them pop up on the far eastern limb of our star. And we did say they were in the southern region of the sun. So here they are, not going to really pose a lot of threat to our magnetic field at this point. And we don't see really any kind of coronal hole action whatsoever on our star, except for in the southern hemisphere, which should just graze the far southern part of our magnetic field, if at all. There's our next possible active region, and I can tell you, since the last couple hours I monitored it, the new data that's come back in, this region here near the 180 is a little bit brighter than what I saw earlier. So that'll be the next spot that we'll watch. It's a possibility of another sunspot. Again, these are typical solar minimum sunspot activity. This pattern right here is very common. You get one sunspot and it sticks around for a few days, and that's it. One. If you look at our sun during our solar maxes, you'll see multiple 3 to 9 different active regions across the star. So the whole thing looks like it's lit up right across it. This is completely quiet. We'll do some more before and after. Actually, I think Mari, we had, yeah. So this is kind of what I was talking about here. If you look to the upper left corner where it says solar cycle 24, there you see that's an active sun. Those are multiple sunspots. That's what a sun looks like when it's in its solar max. And of course, the final 3 in the bottom right corner of the image, the darker red. Now, don't mind you on the intensity of the shade of the colors. These angstroms have been adjusted, so these may not be to the true brightness, but you get the picture when it comes to comparing sunspots and how less of them we are seeing right now, and we have seen over the past several months already. And we are not yet into the solar minimum at the peak anyway, which is predicted later 2019 and early 2020. All right, let's take a look now. Go back. Oh, yeah, TSI. Check this out, guys. This is something to talk about. Huge drop. And I say huge drop because we're usually fluctuating between 1360.60 and 1360.7. And now we have a reading coming in here, and this will be dated for April 11th, I believe. Let's take a look. Yeah, April 10th came in at a 1360.552. It's been a while since we've seen that drop in TSI like that. So interesting to watch. A sudden drop that we have here in our reading for TSI. As you can see here, the last several days, March into April, there's been a pattern here that it doesn't really get too out of control. And this is, as far as we are concerned, from monitoring it for many months into years now, again, not a big deal, but still something to watch. It's dropping a little bit lower than what we've seen it here in the past. So let's take a look at some of our articles we got lined up for you tonight. Republicans' Green New Deal light is political suicide. Now, the attention from this channel and this actual website that we go to here, what's up with that? This is not the first time that Anthony Watts has talked about this situation. We don't want a watered down version of the Green New Deal. And let's read a little bit here from the article. When the Democratic Socialist Republican Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez formally introduced congressional resolution for a Green New Deal, Republicans were handed a powerful, unexpected political gift. But leave it to the weak-minded congressional Republicans to find a way to screw it up. And what he's saying is, and what he's been saying too for the past several weeks, we don't want to hear a solution or alternative to this policy because, for one, the people that oppose this don't believe that our science is pointing in the direction that CO2 is and man is causing climate change or even global temperature increase. Reading on, the Green New Deal would remake the United States via a new national social industrial economic mobilization on a scale not seen since World War II and the New Deal. Those are just empty words. The Free Market American Action Forum conducted an economic analysis on the Green New Deal and found it would cost as much as $94 trillion, or approximately $780,000 per U.S. household. The green energy components alone would cost as much as $12.3 trillion. Now, Ocasio-Cortez asserted justification for the new Green Deal is a mythical U.S.-caused global warming crisis. She and Al Gore tell us since the science is settled, yet global temperatures have risen less than half as much as the UN climate models predicted, and almost exactly as much as global warming skeptics have long predicted. Moreover, the past 150 years, as Earth emerged from the Little Ice Age, the warming climate has brought immeasurable benefits that continue today, including yield records from crops, I should say, a little tongue-tied here, guys. Significant increase in global plant life and a reduction in persistently cool temperatures that kill 20 times more people than higher temperatures. That's a huge stat right there in itself, and that's facts. We should have named the show Facts, because we have talked about this. The cold kills more people than hot temperatures. It's been proven. There's numbers that will back this up. Despite all of this, a small number of congressional Republicans are vigorously pushing the Green New Deal -light. A Green New Deal is a wonderful thing, they say, so long we can just moderate it a little bit. Showing a little daylight between themselves and Gore on climate alarmism, this posse of Republicans is attempting to sell out President Donald Trump and his conservative voting base on the signature political issue of the day. Important that he's bringing this up because the Democrats are running solely on a few things, but mainly climate change. So this is important stats right here in this next paragraph. A lot of political stuff here, voting stuff, blah, blah, blah. Let's get to the juicy part of this. Republican Matt Gaetz, a Republican from Florida, is drafting a Green Real Deal as a 10% less alternative to Ocasio-Cortez's New Deal. Senator Lamar Alexander from Tennessee is also calling for a Manhattan Project to force Americans to utilize expensive, unreliable energy sources. The biggest difference between Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal is Alexander's new Manhattan Project for clean energy is that Ocasio-Cortez calls for a moonshot program and Alexander calls for a Manhattan Project. Big deal. Bottom line here, this would cost a lot of money if they, and we are beating that into everyone's head. We want to keep throwing these numbers at people and showing them what's going to happen if we even suggest a compromise. Now, the one thing that I found interesting is that there is now support in the Green Real Deal for nuclear power. And that was something that was taken out of the fold with Ocasio-Cortez's proposal in the Green New Deal. But that's it. That's really the only thing they're looking. Republicans on that side still want to invest in solar and wind power. So there's still a huge disconnect in Congress, in the Senate. I don't think there is in the White House. Trump's made it clear. He has totally denied that man has anything to do with climate change. Some advisors around him also feel the same way, the EPA director as well. Some of these senators and congressmen that are supporting this idea that this investment would somehow save the planet, these are out-of-touch politicians who really don't understand the real values and needs of American citizens. These are fakes. These are career politicians. And it's obvious. I mean, listen, I am all about burning clean energy. Okay? I want to breathe clean air. I want to drink clean water. So we still have to be responsible about burning fossil fuels. We have to still continue to develop carbon capture technology. The biggest news I've seen is the technology where they can actually convert CO2 into coal and turning it around and using the coal for energy while recapturing the CO2 from what we're burning and recreating the coal. So, I mean, to me, that's great. That's great. I mean, that cuts down on pollution in the air. Everybody wins. And that's the direction we need to move in when we keep these policies in mind. But to say that there's no way to make coal alternatively cleaner or natural gas cleaner is just a blind eye. Look, the dollar amount on this deal says it all, folks. Almost $100 trillion. Taxes. Yeah, that money gets pumped into a lot of jobs. I bet it does. Government paying jobs, top salaries. I get it. But who's getting these contracts? Are the people that get these contracts, are they going to be private? Are they going to be government? Are they going to be allowed to have a political belief? Do they have to support the Democratic Party to get these contracts? Would you dare award a contractor that does not view the same thing you view? So how is a contractor supposed to get in on this deal? Is it because they would have to support the thought and theory that man changes the climate? Which just builds to that phony number with the consensus thing, 97%. So this is all just a big show. All right, smoke and mirrors. Politicians are now starting to come around with the idea of getting in on this money making. I wonder what Senator Lamar Alexander has going on besides his political career. I wonder if he owns property. I wonder if he owns any kind of contracting businesses, building, researching. I mean, who knows? You know, most of these politicians have their hand in the cookie jar way too much anyway. But again, I just wanted to point out another article that is not trying to scaremonger. This is trying to show, again, facts. True facts. This is going to be expensive. And folks, if you believe in an alternate deal for this original project that AOC has come up with, that means you support the theory of man-made global warming. Bottom line, to have an alternative like this senators are trying to do here, Mr. Gates and Lamar Alexander, they really don't understand what's going on. And that's sad. I'll tell you one more thing before we move on too. Recently I was in Atlantic City for a business trip, and there was a giant convention, and it was a lot about infrastructure. And I saw the word climate change and how to, steer it off. So more and more people are trying to already put their foot in the door for these possibility of these contracts that the government could be awarding these companies, like these people that were in Atlantic City, discussing infrastructure, power grids, and climate change. Unfortunately, I couldn't even peek in and take a look. But man, I really wish I could have sat in or even just had a conversation with some of these people and maybe pitch the idea that the science they're talking about that's settled isn't really settled, and I can prove that to you. I can show you peer-reviewed scientific evidence that points the other direction. The chart that I like to show off here recently that shows the peak global anomaly temperature of 0.88 degrees Celsius above baseline back in February of 2016, and now today we're sitting at 0.34 Celsius above So we've lost about a half degree Celsius in the last 3 years, but yet we've gained in CO2. There is more CO2 in the atmosphere today than there was 3 years ago, and yet the temperature is trending down and has lost nearly a full half degree Celsius. That's a lot of temperature drop in a short period of time, guys. On the bigger scale of things, it may not sound like it. Believe me, it is. Unusually high level of landslides worldwide, 1,000 fatalities so far. Even though the first 3 months of the year are usually the least active period, 2019 has already seen an unusual level of landsliding worldwide, with fatalities totaling over 1,000. Significant losses have occurred in rainfall-induced events in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. So we're not even talking about the United States. This is other parts of the world that has suffered really bad. And they might be underplaying India and parts of Turkey right now as well. In his latest post showcasing a dramatic debris video, Peltley said parts of the Himalayas are suffering from unusual levels of pre-monsoon rainfall, with substantial losses from landslides and floods. The Jammu-Singra highway, for example, has been blocked repeatedly over the past few weeks, and there have been several fatal landslides in Pakistan already this year. So what's relevant to this story, to the Grand Solar Minimum channel? Obviously, the basics here. The increase of cosmic ray influx to our atmosphere that has helped creating these sudden atmospheric rivers and these major rainfalls in a short period of time. People are getting 3 months of rain in 24 hours. Some are getting it less than that. Some people are getting their 2-month rain average in 2 hours. These are events that we're not even near the peak yet. This is just the beginning. And these will continue to happen more frequently as the future goes on. I've been saying this for 3 years now because of what I've been taught. And, so far that's stayed true. The weather has gotten worse in the last 3 years. The rain, the intensity of lightning strikes, the intensity of hailstorms, the snowfall has been incredible over the last 10 years in certain spots. In the last 3 years, we broke all kinds of snow records this year in the Northern Hemisphere. The snow mass record was off the charts, unseen. So, we'll leave a link in the description later on. Speaking of strong storms, Hurricane Michael was a Category 5 at landfall, only the 4th in U.S. records, National Hurricane Center says. So they've done another analysis on this situation, and they say the National Hurricane Center found Hurricane Michael to make landfall at Category 5. Camille in 1969 was the only northern Gulf Coast Category 5 landfall. Andrew was a 92, also upgraded to a Cat 5 status afterwards. So Hurricane Michael made an extremely rare Category 5 U.S. landfall last October in the Florida Panhandle. A post-storm analysis has determined meteorologists at the National Hurricane Center found Michael's maximum sustained winds at landfall near Mexico Beach and Tyndall Air Force Base, Florida, were 160 miles per hour, just above the 157 mile an hour threshold to be classified as a Category 5. Michael became only the 4th Category 5 in U.S. hurricane landfall on record, and the first since Hurricane Andrew in 1992, which was also upgraded to a Category 5 status well after it was slammed to South Florida. And here is a map of Camille and Michael, almost splitting opposite directions as they make approach. One goes to the right, one goes to the left. And then the other two hurricanes that made Cat 5 status, Labor Day of 1935, which also came through the Gulf, and also Andrew in 92. Now all these storms, Cat 5s, by the way, were making their way through the Gulf as well. The NHC bumped up landfall winds based on extensive analysis of the reconnaissance aircraft winds, surface pressure, Doppler winds, and estimates of intensity from satellite imagery. As with most all hurricanes, the most intense winds likely occurred in a tiny area near the coast at landfall. So interesting to see. And here we go. 25 billion in damage, by the way, from Michael. All right, 25 billion alone from Michael. We know that the one crop that suffered the most in Georgia was the pecan trees. Those take 7 years to grow and mature to produce the kind of crop that we're getting now. So 7 years from now, things are only going to be worse at that point as far as agriculture concerns are. Summer outlook for Minnesota gets 2 differing forecasts from major weather outlets. Now, the only reason why I brought this up, this is like the bipolar weather channel. That's what I'm going to call them, because one minute they're so global warming drunk, and then the next minute they say things that make sense. And their meteorologists and others are suggesting cooler temperatures this summer for places in Minnesota and other parts of the Northern Plains and Central Plains this winter. Now, I will say this. The Weather Channel went on record this fall and predicted a colder winter than the NOAA forecast we're calling for, and the National Weather Service. The National Weather Service actually called for above average temperatures for almost 80% of the country for our winter season. In fact, that was the complete opposite, and the first channel to really point that out was the Weather Channel. Talks about how this is a classic old Farmer's Almanac versus Farmer's Almanac battle. But the thing that I respect the most about this forecast, and I'm not really here to go over the forecast, is that the Weather Channel acknowledges that soil moisture is responsible for cooling. It has a cooling effect. It states that right there. Now, let's back up. We have meteorologists going on record on a major weather site saying that soil moisture has a cooling effect. So what do you think's happening all over the world where we talk about these record rainfall events? And they're just mentioning Africa, South America. I mentioned India, Southeast Asia, and East Asia as well. And let's face it, the United States, we've seen a lot of moisture, we've seen a lot of snow, we've seen a lot of flooding. We're still underwater. But the main thing here that we can take from this article is that the moisture, the more we have in the soil, the bigger cooling effect it does have. So is it surprising to see a map like this that shows the areas that's going to be cooler? Now, this is the NOAA map. What I find hilarious, they do not show the Weather Channel map. In this article, they give you a word-for-word legend. Here it is. In Minneapolis, high temperatures in June, July, and August are 79 degrees, 83 degrees, and 80 degrees, respectively. Anything below those averages would lend a hand to the below-average forecast being accurate. So it's not like it's going to be cold. It might actually be even more tolerable than normal. Okay, gotcha. But they were talking about the different shades of blue for the Weather Channel, but they won't show the actual graph. So the Weather Channel shows a map that gives us all kinds of colors here that's blue, and NOAA gives us this map. But the one thing that NOAA is telling the truth about, this area in white, all right, this area right here, doesn't change. And the Weather Channel is kind of saying this is the area that's going to be cooler, slightly cooler. The majority of the country, the South, the Plains, even in the mid-Atlantic states, could possibly see a cooler summer. I believe this is probably the only part that might be accurate of this forecast. But the Weather Channel will show you something completely different. And I find it hilarious that journalism Look, they want to sell this global warming stuff so bad that any press that shows a cooler map than NOAA is the supposed to be all top dog of weather. I mean, if you're contradicting NOAA, what are you saying? Are you saying the science isn't settled? Are you saying there's different science at the Weather Channel that everyone's supposed to trust? But yet you also see these stupid articles they talk about where the melting glaciers are causing sea level rise. So what happens when you put 2 ice cubes in a glass of water and those melt? Does that rise the water in the glass? No. So anyway, let's move on. Enough of my rant. Another record to be broke in Milwaukee, in the upper plains here, is the 60-degree record, where it hasn't hit 60 degrees in 197 days. The old record was 196 days, and was back in 1970. We also see other records that were also broken that have similar situations. Sault Ste. Marie hasn't been warmer than 60 degrees since October 4th of 2018. So there's another place, Stamball, Michigan, near Iron River, Michigan. I'm sorry, this is Michigan. Has 115 years of records saw their cold run end in 194 days on April 17th, 2019. So there's 194 days of a stretch where they didn't see 60-degree temperatures. Lower Michigan, Detroit, 2018, October 12th through April 6th, as they went without 70-degree temperatures. Grand Rapids is about the same. There wasn't a 70-degree reading between October 11th, 2018 and April 6th, 2019. So these aren't like crushing any records right now, but they're happening. And these streaks of cooler weather is confirming the shorter growing seasons by keeping temperatures below average for a long expanded period of time. So interesting article, interesting facts and records here for Michigan. I just wanted to point this out and show you all that we are experiencing not only just precipitation issues, but temperatures as well. They're not talking about it as much. The mainstream media will never divulge to you that we've been cooler here lately. All right, so let's go into a segment here and talk about crops. I want to dedicate a good amount of time to it. So here we go. Prices may rise amid flooding from Midwest. Flooding. Talking about fuel prices. I believe last Friday in our last broadcast, I talked to you guys about rising gas prices. And there was a few of you in the comment section that said, I'm out of my mind, or I think you got bad information, or, you know, we're exporting record amounts of oil, you know, blah, blah, blah. I get all that, but I tried to tell people, and here we are talking about it now. This was published on March 28th. So this is not old news. This has been out for a little while, but I discovered this article because somebody was asking for some sources here. So we're looking at this, and I've talked to my brother about this. We were just talking about how food prices and fuel prices are going to go up because of these floods from snow and the rain that we've seen across the northern plains and the Midwest. Nebraska is the third largest corn producer. So therefore, Nebraska is really going to affect ethanol production and corn production. I believe it's somewhere around the tail of 1 million acres are underwater in Nebraska. And I'll tell you something else too, guys. There's a lot of information that's being withheld. It's hard to find the critical updates that we need to speak about the Midwest and the situation that's happening out there. But like I had predicted a week ago, and like I've warned, we are now going to experience an increase in gas prices. And not just because it's getting warmer out either, guys. Canada, you think you got it bad here? Canada, parts of Canada are paying US dollar terms $5.94 a gallon for fuel right now. Their low grade gallon right now will cost you about $4.47. Okay, that's I'm translating this for our American or United States listeners. The number, when you look at it, like the high number for Canada, the $5.94 mark, in Canada it's 192.5. So it looks way bigger and way worse than it was. So we went ahead and found something that could translate the prices for us so we can understand it here in U.S. cents. But $5.94 is what places in Canada are paying for their fuel. And let's not forget how much snow they've had in most parts. Yeah, they get a lot of snow in the wintertime. But we were talking about Canada this year too. A lot of records, a lot of cold records, a lot of snow records. And Alberta and BC, I mean, they were getting plowed with moisture. So they were flooding, and they were getting a lot of snow, and they were getting a lot of rain. Again, this is a common narrative in 2019. And we thought things were ramping up a little bit in 2019, so far, I am shocked when I was searching the web today for news stories. And I look at mainstream stuff first. I don't even type anything in the search. I want to see the mainstream headlines before I start typing anything in. 1 to 3 articles that even talks about climate or what's happening around the world or locally. 1 to 3 articles. So you have to look for this on purpose. And the articles they offer are not informative enough, and they don't give all the information that we really need. It's alarming how much mainstream media is hiding right now from us. You really have to dig. This show takes a little while to pull up some stuff. You really got to dig sometimes for certain things. Where the numbers on floods, even I remember when a couple snowstorms we got, it was impossible to find snow totals for certain areas of the Northeast at times. You really had to know where to go to get your readings. But anyway, I wanted to bring this article up tonight because, we've had a lot of rain and a lot of issues out there in the Midwest and the Northern Plains, and they are laying it out right here why we are going to see some expensive fuel prices. Grain trader Archer Daniels Midland expects to lose $50 to $60 million in profit in the first quarter from flooding. Grain farmers are in a bind caused by more than the flooding. Storage bins are fuller than normal since the U.S. trade war with China led some farmers to hold off selling to wait for better prices. The prices may go up, but not to the benefit of the affected farmers, since all contaminated grain must be destroyed, according to federal policy. Now, this is asinine, and we need to fix this right here. Are you telling me that there's nothing we can do with the contaminated grain? Is there nothing at all we can make out of this that can be salvaged? I just find it unfortunate for these farmers that this grain is a total loss. There's not some kind of alternative use that we could have for the grain. I'm almost positive we could make some form of fuel out of that. Anyway, and here it gets even sadder, honestly, guys. I hate using the Clinton News Network. A lot of people are talking about this floods in Nebraska. I mean, here's the grain that we were talking about. That's all bad. Even if there is dry grain underneath all of this right here, it's contaminated now. It's been exposed to water. According to federal policy, it has to be destroyed. One farmer says, I would say 50% of the farmers in our area will not recover from this. 50% of our farmers in our area will not recover from this. We continue to watch the Mississippi flood. This area is going to get worse. We've had weather to support that. Look at this, 700 hogs drowned at one farm. We've talked about Australia with over 500,000 cattle that were killed due to winter storms this year. Several thousand cows that were killed in the Northwest. I'm sure this 700 hog farm here is just one in very many. The fate of other animals is a mystery. Sheldon, the owner of Iowa Farm, said Wednesday he knows of 6 facilities holding about 3,000 pigs each, and no one was immediately able to reach the flooded buildings to see how the livestock fared. We aren't even done assessing the damage, guys, and these floods have been around for a while now. This is not news. Look, this is current right here. Looks like there's some livestock coming out of the water here, or attempting to. Unreal, guys. As you can see, the barns are water almost halfway up. Nobody can get to them. So you paint the picture. Are we going to see any way of possibly recovering from this when the waters aren't receding? As we continue to get more moisture? Farmer says he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in ruined harvest. What is the significance of these articles that we discuss here on this channel? Some farmers won't fear they won't even plant this year. So the point is that these grand solar minimum events that we have every 200 years or so in a cycle create these conditions, but more on a frequent basis. And we're in the very beginning of this cycle. And we're starting to see what can happen. This is scary for me, guys. Farmers fear they won't plant this year. Over 50% won't recover from this. So that means less grain, less corn, less fuel, less feed for the cattle, less cattle to sell, less beef to sell, less food. Overall, that's the big picture. Less food. U.S. disaster aid won't cover lost crops in the Midwest floods. Farmers out millions of dollars. Yeah. Record flooding that has overwhelmed the Midwestern United States this spring has taken to a significant toll on farmers, and the U.S. disaster aid isn't covering crop loss by the floods. The federal policy states that the grain damage from flooded river water has to be destroyed, and according to Reuters, there's nothing the U.S. government can do about the millions of damaged crops under current laws or disaster aid programs. I want to start a pledge, some kind of drive. We have to get the drumbeat out now to the American government. This has to change. This is not acceptable. So right now, our current policies are going to drive our agriculture out of business. Reuters reports that this is a problem the USDA has never seen on this scale before. Yeah, grand solar minimum. Because U.S. farmers have never stored so much of their harvest. Okay, I get it. They've stored it. Why? They're trying to get prices to cooperate with the market because they're not making enough right now. They're scared because the last 2 years they've seen some strange weather in the spring that's delayed their planting seasons. And it gets worse each year. So you can't blame the farmers who are trying to get more for their product because they're starting to see there's a huge problem when it comes to planting and the weather cooperating. Midwestern farmers have been storing all their corn and soybeans in unprecedented amounts due to U.S. China trade war. That might have something to do with it. But mainstream media wants to hate our president, even though they have an investigation that took 2 years to find that he didn't do anything wrong and there was no collusion. We still have to attack this man, apparently. So let's blame all of this on the China trade war. That's the easy thing to do, right? Political pressure. blame the farmer starving on the trade war, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is the government policy, and President Trump needs to act now and change this. And I know millions of Americans will agree with me on this. We have to take care of our agriculture, our farmers. Less people are wanting to get into the industry, and the more that continues to go down, the less food that we're going to produce, which means our food prices are going to be high because we have to import them. On top of the fact that we're losing crops to climate. This is all in cycles. You could read about the Maunder minimum. You could read about the Dalton minimum. You could read about all these grand solar minimums that created food and food security issues and famine. And back then, they killed millions of people, and they didn't have the population that this planet has now. And how the heck are we supposed to feed 7.2 billion people in this world? Countries like Africa and, Venezuela already have hard enough time feeding their people. Countries across, India. We're already struggling to feed our people now. How are we going to keep up with crop loss like this? And if this doesn't upset you as a citizen of this country, that either A, you don't like to eat, or B, you really don't understand what's happening right now. So I think it's a good idea. I'd like some ideas in the comment section for you folks out there. What can we do to get to the White House and demand policy change on how our farmers are being treated right now? This is the ultimate loophole for all of these insurance policies right now on their properties. If our government policies are saying there's nothing they can do about the floods right now and nothing about the crop loss, what do you think the insurance companies are telling these farmers? I'm sorry. Government regulations prevents me from paying you. If President Trump can't see the importance in this, I don't know what to say, because this is scary. These people are going to be comped for the damages. And I've already talked to you guys about how 2018 crop losses down in the South, $25 billion of damage down there from Hurricane Michael. People are still waiting for money from that store. So the more we march into this, and the more we look and research for ourselves, we're finding out this is no joke anymore. It's time we start paying attention. It's time we start putting things into action and not spend trillions of dollars on changing the infrastructure to prevent climate change. There's nothing we can do that's going to prevent what's happening right now. It's going to happen. Even if we somehow came up with a way to pay for it all, and it didn't cost us anything to change over to this green policy, it's not going to save any lives. It's not going to save the crops. Rolling blackouts, people not being able to heat their homes during the winters because of solar and wind not being reliable. Could you imagine if we actually followed AOC's plan and said, hey, we're kicking coal out the window. No more nuclear, no more coal, no more hydro plants. Solar and wind, baby. Or figure it out. That's what she's telling you. Meanwhile, these politicians are going to get super rich from all their contracts to build this infrastructure. Very important, guys. We start taking action. Stuff like this, we got to help the farmers out. We got to support them. We got to be their voice. We got to step up. Something about this has to change. While we're on the subject of crops, this is a map of suitable days for crop work, or field work, I should say. This is the first time I've seen it this year. And as you can see, Nebraska's got 2.2 on the average suitable days. Looking at 0.1 day of suitable work in Minnesota. 0.1 day in South Dakota, 0.1 day, or 0.7 in North Dakota. You almost get 2 days in Iowa, slightly improving. Illinois, still underwater, 1.7 days. But once you start getting to Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, You're getting some average days to work in the field. Ohio, 2.8. Not that great. Not for this time of year. We're also seeing things being affected in the South. The deep South, that is. Louisiana, 2 days. Mississippi, 1.4. 2.6 in Arkansas. But considering what kind of storms we're having right now, 4.7 in Alabama and 5 in Georgia ain't too hateful. So there is hope that we could start seeing some progression here and planting beginning as early as late April, early May, as long as our weather holds off. And we'll get into that here in a bit. In fact, we'll go ahead and switch over to our weather report. We'll be right back, guys. All right, so let's go into our weather, severe weather. Let's wrap up the storms in the South. Severe weather kills 4 as tornadoes, thunderstorms march across the South. An 8-year-old girl was killed Friday after a tree fell on a home just south of Tallahassee. It's kind of weird. I don't know if the mainstream media picks that particular headline, but I feel like the last 2 years during the spring, the fatalities that we've talked about have been children and victims of fallen trees. The reason why I'm stopping and pointing this out is because obviously the moisture in the soil, the high winds that we've experienced, a lot of trees are falling, a lot of telephone poles are falling on all parts of the country. Here in New York, you drive up and down the highway and you see trees falling all over the place, up and down the highway. 2 people died in Mississippi where 9 tornadoes were reported on Thursday. An Alabama woman died after a tree fell on her home. That's another headline. More than 160,007 homes and businesses across 5 states were without power early Friday afternoon. I think we can safely say in the month of April we've had more than close to 2 million people without power because of storms. That's just less than 1 month. At least 4 people have died as severe thunderstorms continue to march across the southern U.S., spawning tornadoes, knocking trees into homes, blowing over cars, and causing roads to flood. At least 28 tornadoes were reported as of Friday evening since the severe weather outbreak started on Wednesday. A tornado was reported on the ground around 4:45 p.m. today in Hillsborough, North Carolina, just north of Chapel Hill. Several local TV news outlets reported downed trees and damage to buildings. Much of the state was under severe weather warnings, including tornadoes, flash floods, and thunderstorms. On Thursday, 1 person was killed in Neshoba County, Mississippi, about 83 miles northeast of Jackson, according to Neshoba Democrat newspaper. Then the rural town of Gillsburg in southwest Mississippi, a 24-year-old was killed while driving in the storm. In Alabama, officials said a 42-year-old woman was killed Thursday night. St. Clair County, a tree had fallen on her home. On Friday, storms prompted officials to close the Sunshine Skyway Bridge across Tampa, Florida, due to severe weather and high winds. There's a bridge out in Buffalo that also shuts down if the winds get past a certain mile per hour. And I'll tell you what a pain in the butt it is when you have to reroute traffic around major bridges like that. Hundreds of flights were canceled or delayed Friday afternoon and evening at the airports Charlotte, Newark, Atlanta, Boston, and other locations along the East Coast. Delta Airlines had announced earlier in the week that passengers scheduled to fly to or from a dozen airports into the Northeast on Friday could change their itinerary at no additional cost. Affected airports include those in Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Newark, and Washington, D.C. At least 2 school districts in Georgia were closed Friday, and Florida State University in Tallahassee was closed until 10 a.m. More than 230,000 homes and businesses across multiple states affected by the storms were without power on Friday evening as well. So just in this one storm in 2 days, over 500,000 people, or close to 500,000 people, were without power from this storm. More news for North Carolina. Images of the trees that have fallen in South Carolina. Also reporting high winds. Here we are in Virginia, Georgia, where storm rains have washed away the road. That good old Georgia clay there, guys. They have that stuff there in Tennessee as well. One person was slightly injured when a tree came down on the apartment complex in Atlanta suburb, with the AP reports. Fire truck on its back here. High winds. We'll leave the link in the description, guys. Lots of severe weather happening across the South. I think that's what this is talking about here. Right now we're talking about through tonight the very, very high region of severe weather, which we are going to keep our eyes on. South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. Severe weather all the way possible through Pennsylvania and New York City, and all the way down as far south as Miami. Moderate to heavy rain is expected across all of the Northeast, and we will now go into our GFS outlook and talk about that. Here's what we're looking at overnight, okay? Heavy rain to move through the Northeast, through the Ohio Valley, into Kentucky, Virginia, and of course that severe weather through the night. Now we go into later early morning, Saturday, April 20th, and a batch of heavy precipitation is falling across the majority part of New York. The Albany region could encounter some issues as well as far as upstate New York, way north, but there's that pile of moisture that could cause more problems off the coast. We'll keep an eye on that. Right now, that's developing off the coast, so that's good news. But this rain is going to be persistent for most of the Northeast, and then finally break up on Easter Sunday. And we start to dry out just a little bit, really, in all the parts of the country. Now, as we move this GFS model forward, we start to see more rain developing in parts of the plains. Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, parts that really don't need the moisture. And then another system develops on the 23rd. That's what the GFS is suggesting, going through Kansas, Oklahoma, and kind of weakening a bit, but then regaining some strength along the way. And again, the South will be inundated with moisture, as the Northeast by Thursday, April 25th, will also experience heavy to moderate rainfall in the Northeast. Then the system pushes out on the 26th. Again, very similar to what we're going through right now. So we could have a repeat storm of what we're experiencing. And let's take a look at the current radar. Let's update that, make sure we got the current pictures here. So right now we're in a lull where we are located, upstate New York, but places in Pennsylvania, along the coast here, New Jersey, into New York City, Philadelphia, North Carolina. We're still seeing some heavy rain right now. And thank God this weird eye closed up in the storm. I was starting to wonder about what was going on. You see the eye at the beginning of the show, now closing up. And this is now starting to, in my eyes, is weakening a little bit. Maybe intensifying here in the Ohio River Valley, southwest Indiana, north or southeast Illinois, and to parts of western Kentucky. They have seen a persistent heavy rain. So we're going to watch that area. Now, the runoff, the flooding waters into the Mississippi is going to be a situation here as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. But as we're going through our GFS into next weekend, again, a similar situation, moisture moving off. And then look at this, April 27th. Okay, snow in Montana, Idaho, not that big of a deal at this point in the year. But watch this storm system as it moves along. I mean, folks, a few hours earlier, this storm was trekking further south. Now GFS has got it in Canada, which is fine by me. Unfortunate for you folks in Canada. But by the end of April, the GFS is still suggesting that we could see temperatures cold enough for snow going into May in parts of the northwest United States. And there were forecasters that were trying to tell us that we were going to see a dry pattern from late April to early May. This is considered a dry pattern. Take a look at motion. Less intense for a couple days. It picks back up. Not bad. This is moderate right here. But then at the end of the month, we start picking up once again in frequency and intensity. And the GFS is suggesting wave after wave of moisture going across the plains, into the Ohio Valley, across the southern United States, and into the Northeast. This pattern continues into May. And it doesn't look like it's going to let up. So where are we going to be at temperature-wise, you say? Glad you asked. spring is here for sure. Some areas could experience some summer-like warmth. The Southwest, right now, parts of Arizona looking at 96 degrees. That's pretty hot for April. Take a look at the futurecast, though, and again, warming up really nicely across the central United States into the 70s, possibly 80s readings. Texas, you're getting warm like you should be right about this time. But a very strange pattern here in the United States in temperatures. We cool off a little bit, and then look at April 22nd. Just absolutely gorgeous spring weather throughout most of the country here. 80s in the deep south, 70s, mid-70s across Ohio Valley, Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, Oklahoma. And then we start to see a little bit of a cool off here in mid-April, or I should say late April. As we go past the 23rd, the East Coast will start to warm up a little bit. And this warm front moves further east. At night, we see a little dip in the temperatures, and that's pushing that warm air across. But look at this, guys. The South and the central United States is making a huge recovery in temperatures at this point. We're looking at almost summer-type heat at this point. The Northeast staying about normal, and across the middle United States, again, some decent warmth for April. I just wonder if this GFS, now if you notice in Minnesota, guys, temperatures, we weren't saying that it was going to be cold and snowing, but I mean, while the rest of the country is warming up into the 70s and 80s, Minnesota's staying in the 50s and 60s. They may flirt with 70s once. So in the next 15 to 20 days, the Minnesota will see a 70-degree temperature reading once in the near future. So that's the temperature decrease that they were talking about. Again, we weren't talking about cold records here. We were talking about cooler temperatures. And they get one chance at 70 degrees over the span of the next 15 to 20 days. So I think the Weather Channel might have this right, because right now the GFS, which is always trending warmer, is indicating that as well, in my opinion. I see cooler temperatures in that region. The rest of the United States, Central Plains, Ohio Valley, the South, especially the South, man, we're looking at 90-degree readings here May 5th. Comfortable and pleasant in the Northeast, guys. Can't complain about mid-60s. If the sun's out, mid-60s feel pretty good. Let's take a look at our El Nino situation that might be causing some of these issues. But look at that. We are once again seeing a decrease in the temperature in the El Nino 3.4 region. Right now we're sitting at 0.618 above baseline. And each time we see this thing bottom out, the bottom keeps going further and further now to neutral conditions for El Nino. And this is what we've pretty much been reporting on all year. A very, very weak El Nino, Modaki to be exact. And some forecasters are saying that this thing is just going to remain neutral through late summer, possibly through the fall, before possibility of a La Nina. Now, I know some forecasters are saying this could be a double El Nino. Maybe it will, but let's keep an eye on this. We've been talking about this situation all year long and last year as well. And so far, I think this channel's done a pretty good job of staying on point and staying on track with what we believe as well, that this has always been a moderate to weak El Nino and really has barely fit the criteria for the El Nino situation. And as far as that goes, that's going to do it for tonight's broadcast. Mari, did you have anything you would like to add to tonight's broadcast or say hello to anyone in the chat?
Welcome back, GSM. That's all I have to say. It's good to be back, isn't it, Jake? It's been a long journey moving, but gosh, I'm so happy that we did, and it's just exciting. We have Justin L. I'd like to thank you. We got people do super chats because they know how hard it is to move, and they wanted to show us a little love, Jake.
Well, thank you, guys.
So thank you, Justin L., Lady T, Survival, and Walter Seal. Thank you very, very much. Very humbled by that. Lucas, he is dodging tornado warnings down there. And he had to unplug his weather alert radio because it was driving crazy when it shut off.
Oh, I bet.
Going off like nuts there. So, hello. Stay safe if you're in this Tornado Valley zone. Is that where? I didn't listen to all the tornado.
That's all right. It's right across the south. Right now, the threat is going to be across South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia tonight and through early morning. So we're really going to have to keep an eye on what's going on the East Coast. There's going to be possible spin-ups from this storm, this low-pressure system here in the South right now.
That's all I have. It's a pleasure chatting with all you guys, and it's just great to be back. And we'll get back on it and have a lot more content on the way now that we're sort of settled, aren't we, Jake?
Yes, sir.
Our internet, sir?
Sir.
Excuse me?
Sorry.
I'm sick. Yes.
It's been a long week. I feel like I've had a day off in 2 weeks.
Well, you haven't had a day off in 2 weeks, Jake.
And really, I can't tell everybody out there, thank you so much for being patient. TSM Solar Observations. Formerly known as the Starman. Again, thank you, my friend, for everything that you do for this channel. The understanding that you helped me with. And we just are blessed and privileged to have someone like you. We have other like minds out there as well that are help supporting this channel behind the scenes. And Monday night, 9 p.m., make sure you tune in. I will announce who our special guest will be. And this person is got wonderful information. It's been a while since we've done an interview, but we finally have one lined up, and I think everyone here is going to want to watch this one. So, guys, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, happy Easter to everyone out there, and we will talk soon.